Hello there, guys. As I promised, today we're gonna talk about criminal law. What is criminal law? What exactly is this exciting part of our legal system? Well, criminal law is concerned with the liability of one person for his wrongdoing to another person, society, or the state in general. A crime, it must be noted that the crime requires an actus reus, which is a guilty act, and mens rea, which is the guilty mind. So let's go on and let's analyze actus reus and mens rea. What is actus reus? As I've said, actus reus is the guilty act. It needs to be a voluntary, deliberate, and unlawful act. And it must be noted that there needs to be causation, a link between the act of the defendant and the harm caused to the victim. But what about involuntary acts? What happens if the act of the defendant is involuntary? Will he be liable for causing the harm on the victim? Well, the answer is no, because let's imagine that I am a muscular person, I'm very powerful, very muscular, and I take a knife. I take the knife and I put it in the hand of a weak person and I force that person to stab another person and kill him. Will the weak person, be liable for the homicide of the other person? Well, he will not be, because he had no intention to inflict death on the other person. So, involuntary acts do not count as actus reus. Only voluntary, deliberate, and unlawful acts count as actus reus. But what about omissions? When you fail to act? Generally, guys, they do not count as actus reus. However, again, we have some exceptions. Let's say if there is a specific act of parliament requiring a person to act, then yes. If a person's contract requires him to act, if a person undertakes a duty, then he must act. If, let's say for example, that a person's public position requires him to act. Generally, these are the occasions where an omission can be fatal, and an omission will count as an actus reus in order to establish a crime and criminal liability. So generally, this is it about actus reus. Let's go now in the criminal guilty minds, mens rea. Mens rea, as I've said, guilty mind. We can distinguish between two levels of mens rea: intention, which is the highest level of mens rea, and recklessness, a lower level of mens rea. Intention, as I've said, is the higher level of the guilty mind, the higher level of mens rea. It can be a direct intention, where you directly intend to cause harm on the victim, or an indirect intention, where your intention and your goal, your aim, is not to cause harm to the victim. However, your actions indeed inflict harm on the victim. And what is this lower level of mens rea? What is exactly recklessness? Recklessness is when you comprehend, you understand that there is a risk if you undertake a particular task, an action, but you just go on with that action. You go on with that action, you ignore the risks, and as a result, you may cause harm to the person, and then there is a lower level, but there is still a level of mens rea in order to establish a crime. We've talked about mens rea, we talked about actus reus. Let's talk a bit about causation that I've mentioned before, and in this episode and in previous episodes. As I've said, causation is the link between the defendant's action and the damage caused to the victim. There is factual causation and there is legal causation. Factual causation can be established with the but-for test. But for the defendant's action, would have the victim been incurred with such damage? And legal causation, we apply the operating and substantial cause. Let's say, for example, I'm going to give you a relevant case, a scenario that I'm going to think now, for you to understand and comprehend what is legal causation. Let's say that I'm at my house, I'm alone, I'm watching TV, and I call my friend, my best friend, to come at the house and watch TV together, have some drinks, order some pizza. He, on his way to come to my house, he is robbed and killed by robbers. Would I be liable for his death? Because let's say if I applied the but for test, but for my invitation to come to my house, he would have been alive. So am I liable for his homicide? Obviously not, I am not liable for his homicide, because my invitation, my action, was not the operating and substantial cause of his death. The operating and substantial cause of his death, what caused his death, were the robbers that robbed him and killed him. So you understand, it's quite of a clear distinction between factual and legal causation. In order for a case to be valid, we require both factual and legal causation. It's clear, it's easy. Let's continue. I want to talk now about the case of transferred malice. What is transferred malice? It's when I have an intent. I've got a mens rea intended for person A, but unfortunately the person B that I do not intend to do something on him, unfortunately he also incurs the damage. Let's say I'm going to give you another example, because it's much easier to understand everything using everyday life examples. Let's say I'm in a queue at the post office, let's say, and the person in front of me, he's very annoying and he gets on my nerves, and I push him because I'm very annoyed, and he falls on the old lady in front of him, and the old lady unfortunately falls on the floor, and she hits with her head and she dies. This is the case of transferred malice, because I intended to push and cause annoyance or some harm to the person in front of me, and unfortunately I transfer my action and my intention on a person that I never intended to cause harm to him or her. So you get what I mean with transferred malice. We've talked now about actus reus, mens rea, we talked about causation, we've talked about transferred malice, and I want you now to get something else cleared out in your minds. And what is that? It is a distinction between the offenses of assault and the offense of battery. What is assault? What is battery? Assault is when there is an intention or recklessness to cause fear, to cause another person to apprehend unlawful and immediate violence. Let's say, for example, that I'm driving my car and the person in the next car, he does something that is very annoying to me, and I shout to him, I'm gonna kill you. At that moment, I committed assault, because that guy has feared his life, because I told him that I'm gonna kill you. So this is assault. Again, causation needs to be established in some way. And let's talk about the offense of battery. What is battery? Battery is actually causing this unlawful and immediate violence on the other person. And I must make clear that even the slightest touch, even touching the other person's clothes, can be considered as a battery. This is it with battery and assault. Let's go on with the last thing for this episode, which are the offenses against the Person Act of 1861. We're going to talk about Section 47, Section 20, and Section 18. I'm going to talk about the actus reus of each offense and the mens rea of each offense. Let's begin with Section 47. The actus reus of Section 47 is assault occasioning actual bodily harm. And let's analyze each word. Assault, I've analyzed it before. It's causing another person to apprehend violence, unlawful and immediate violence. Occasioning, it means that there needs to be some sort of a causation, as I've mentioned before. And actual bodily harm. Harm, it means a sense of injury. And actual, it means that it shouldn't be trivial. Okay, you understood it. Let's go on the mens rea. The mens rea is that there needs to be intention or recklessness to cause another person to apprehend unlawful and immediate violence, or to cause to that person unlawful violence. It's easy. Let's go on. Section 20. Section 20, the actus reus is causing to the other person grievous bodily harm or